Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be going beyond just like adulting, like just getting by.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be exploring what it really takes to thrive in the 21st century.
That's right.
And to help us on this journey, we've got a fascinating chapter called The Brilliant Star Framework,
Yep.
written by William G. Huitt, published in 2018.
It's a great chapter. It's designed to help people, really anyone, navigate the increasing pace of change and complexity that we're seeing in the world today.
And get this, it's not just about, cramming your head with facts.
Right.
This framework really pushes us to develop like a whole range of human capacities.
Yeah, I'm a holistic view.
Moving beyond, just traditional school subjects to consider the whole person.
Who uses this really cool visual metaphor. It's a star with 8 points, each representing a different capacity that we can develop. And at the center is the self, integrating all these different facets of our being.
Okay, I love a good visual. So let's break down the star. First, we need to understand the difference between a capacity and a competency.
Right. So think of a capacity as the potential you have, like a seed waiting to sprout. A competency is that potential put into action, the actual skill or ability that grows from that seed.
So it's not like we're just born with like a fixed set of abilities, right?
Not at all.
We can actually cultivate and develop these capacities throughout our lives.
Absolutely. And while schools definitely play a role, Huitt really emphasizes that families and communities are also crucial for nurturing these capacities. It really does take a village.
It really does. First up on our star-shaped journey, first point of the star, cognitive intelligence.
Right.
This is the one that usually gets all the attention.
Yeah, the one we usually think of first.
It's what we associate with, good grades and test scores, right?
Right, but there's a common misconception that cognitive intelligence is set in stone. People think, you're either born smart or you're not. But research really paints a different picture.
Oh, tell me more. I'm all about busting those limiting beliefs.
Well, Huitt talks about this program, Feuerstein's Instrumental Enrichment Program, which actually demonstrated that you can improve cognitive skills through targeted learning experiences. They even saw changes in IQ scores with this program.
So there's hope for all of us yet. We can actually become, smarter or better thinkers, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And remember Sternberg's triarchic theory of intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
He argues that it's not just about being book smart. We need analytic, creative, and practical intelligence for real-world success.
So it's about being able to analyze information, come up with new ideas, A&D, like apply those ideas to solve like real problems.
Exactly. And there are specific programs and lessons designed to help people develop each of these types of intelligence.
So cool. Okay, that was cognitive intelligence, one point of the star. But what about, the power of our emotions? That's the one that I feel like is often overlooked.
It is. And that brings us to affective or emotional intelligence. For a long time, emotions were sort of ignored in discussions of intelligence. But thankfully, that's changing.
So you're saying my feelings actually matter?
More than you might think. Researchers like Salovey, Juner, and Goleman have shown how much our emotions impact our thinking and behavior. It's like this hidden operating system running in the background, influencing everything we do.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. So what exactly is emotional intelligence?
Well, there are different perspectives, which makes it even more fascinating.
Okay.
Salovey and Juner, they break it down into 4 key aspects.
Yeah.
Perceiving emotions, using emotions to think, understanding them, and managing them effectively.
Wow, that sounds like a lot. It's like a whole other skill set we need to develop.
Yeah, it is. But it's really essential for navigating life successfully.
Yeah.
Huitt also highlights Denham's work, which focuses specifically on emotional understanding, expression, and regulation.
Right.
These are like the building blocks of healthy emotional development.
So why should we care about all this? What's the payoff of, developing our emotional intelligence? Well, think about it. Emotional intelligence is linked to things like happiness and well-being.
Right.
It helps us build stronger relationships, make better decisions, and cope with stress more effectively.
So it's not just about being happy-go-lucky all the time. It's about understanding our emotions, managing them well, and using them as valuable information.
Precisely. And speaking of happiness, Huitt dives into Seligman's research,
Okay.
which identifies 3 different orientations to happiness.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these happiness orientations.
First, we have pleasure, or hedonic happiness, which is the enjoyment we get from indulging in things we like. You know, that first bite of chocolate cake or that feeling of sunshine on your skin.
I'm definitely familiar with that one.
Right. Then there's engagement or flow, the happiness we experience when we're completely absorbed in a challenging and meaningful activity. It's like when you're so engrossed in a project that time just flies by.
Oh, yeah, I totally get that when I'm lost in writing a good script. hmm And finally, there's meaning, or eudaimonic happiness. This one comes from living a life that is aligned with our values and purpose.
Okay.
It's about contributing to something bigger than ourselves.
So it's finding that like deeper sense of fulfillment, knowing that you're making a difference.
Exactly. And research shows that meaning-related happiness is actually the strongest predictor of overall life satisfaction.
Wow. That's pretty powerful. But I'm curious, how do we actually address emotional intelligence, particularly in schools? I mean, I know they do some things, but
Yeah, that's where things get a little tricky.
okay.
Huitt points out that early childhood experiences, especially those relationships with our primary caregivers, have a huge impact on our emotional development.
So if someone didn't have, those really positive early experiences, does that mean they're kind of out of luck?
Not at all.
Hmm.
It just means we need to be even more intentional about providing supportive environments and learning opportunities that foster that emotional growth. It's a challenge, though, because a lot of programs don't focus solely on emotional intelligence.
Right.
It's often woven into things like social emotional learning, conflict resolution training, or even moral development programs.
So it's about creating a culture that like values and supports emotional intelligence rather than just teaching it as a separate subject.
Exactly. Now, are you ready to, flex your willpower?
Bring it on.
hmm
What's next on our journey through the Brilliant Star framework?
We're diving into conative intelligence.
Okay.
This is the ability to use our will to take purposeful action. It's closely tied to concepts of agency and self-regulation.
Okay, so this sounds like the key to actually getting things done, not just, dreaming about them.
That's right,
Yup.
harnessing that inner drive and directing it towards your goals.
I am ready to unlock that potential. All right, conative intelligence, let's unpack this a little bit. What exactly does it involve?
Okay, so think of it as like the driving force behind your intentions and actions, like using your will to steer your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors toward a desired outcome.
So more than just willpower, like resisting that extra slice of cake.
Exactly. It's about understanding how self-regulation works and using it to achieve your goals.
I'm really loving this idea of unlocking potential. But honestly, this whole conation thing, that's kind of new to me. Like, where did this concept even come from?
Yeah, it's been around in psychology for a while, but it's had its ups and downs in terms of popularity. For a long time, the dominant scientific view was like deterministic, like everything was predetermined, no room for free will.
Oh, wow. So in that view, there's no point in even trying to develop conative intelligence because we're all just puppets.
Pretty much. Thankfully, that model has evolved. Now we see the universe as more open and adaptive. There's room for us to be active agents in our own lives.
Which brings us back to conative intelligence.
Yes. Huitt really highlights the work of Bandura. He was a leading researcher in this area, and he identified 4 key components of self-regulation, which is basically conative intelligence in action.
Okay, hit me with those components.
First, intentionality. This is the ability to set a clear purpose and start moving towards it.
So having that vision and taking that first step.
Then, forethought, like planning and anticipating the future, setting goals, strategizing, thinking ahead.
Being proactive, not just reacting to whatever comes your way.
Got it.
What's next?
Self-reactiveness.
Uh,
This is monitoring your progress, making adjustments, staying on track toward your goals. It's like having an internal GPS guiding you.
so being self-aware and adaptable. Makes sense. And the final component.
Self-reflection. This is evaluating your performance, learning from your experiences, using that to improve in the future.
So taking that time to pause, assess, and make sure you're on the right path. This is all connecting so well. But how does this relate to lifelong learning? We hear that a lot these days.
That's a great question. Huitt really emphasizes that in today's world, being able to learn and adapt is crucial. And guess what? Conative intelligence drives that process.
Oh, interesting.
It's about being a self-directed learner, setting your own goals, taking charge of your own development.
So learning isn't just confined to a school setting. It's about continuous growth throughout our lives.
Exactly. And research shows that, conative intelligence is a skill that you can learn and strengthen. There are strategies out there to help you become more self-regulated and achieve your goals.
That's encouraging. So we're not just stuck at some, like, fixed level of willpower.
Nope. Now, ready to get physical, the Brilliant Star framework also includes bodily kinesthetic intelligence.
Always up for a challenge. Tell me more about this physical intelligence.
It's about using our bodies to interact with the world in amazing ways.
Okay, I'm ready to move. We often hear about this, like, mind-body connection. Is this taking it to a new level?
It is.
Yeah.
Huitt explains that Gardner, the multiple intelligences guy,
Yeah.
he also saw bodily kinesthetic intelligence as its own distinct capacity.
So it's not just about being athletic.
Nope, it's much broader than that. It's about controlling your movements, coordinating actions, using your body to express yourself, to solve problems, to interact with your environment.
So a dancer, a surgeon, and a sculptor are all using bodily kinesthetic intelligence in different ways.
Exactly. Huitt breaks it down into, two main components.
Hmm.
Gross motor skills. Those are the ones that use your large muscles for actions like running and jumping.
Mm-hmm.
And then fine motor skills, the precise movements of your hands and fingers, like playing music or writing.
So bodily kinesthetic intelligence covers a whole range of abilities, like from the very athletic to the very artistic.
And both are important. Huitt also stresses basic physical competence, things like cardiovascular endurance, strength, and flexibility.
Okay, so a strong and healthy foundation is important too, not just like fancy skills.
Absolutely. Those basic competencies are essential for overall health and well-being.
Okay.
But here's where it gets a little concerning.
Uh-oh, what's the catch?
Well, Huitt highlights the global obesity epidemic, which is impacting children's health in a major way.
That's so sad. But like, what does that have to do with bodily kinesthetic intelligence?
Well, if kids aren't developing that basic physical competence and maintaining a healthy weight, it's going to be much harder to fully develop and use their bodily kinesthetic intelligence.
It's like having a powerful engine, but not having the right fuel or the right maintenance.
Perfect analogy. Physical activity and healthy eating are crucial for both physical and cognitive development. But addressing this is challenging.
Yeah, what are some of the roadblocks?
Well, there's a lot of misinformation out there about nutrition and exercise, right?
Okay.
It's hard to know what's truly healthy.
I totally get that. It seems like there are always new diet trends and fitness fads popping up.
Exactly. Plus, with all the pressure on schools to raise test scores, you know what happens. Physical education and recess often get cut.
Oh, that's a shame. I loved running around at recess as a kid.
It's not just about fun, though. Research shows that physical activity can actually boost academic performance.
So taking away those activities might actually hurt academic achievement, it seems like. Counterproductive.
It is. Luckily, though, some schools are doing things right, with programs that really emphasize both nutrition and exercise, involve parents, and just make physical activity a priority.
Okay, so it's about building a culture that values physical well-being, just like we talked about with emotional intelligence.
Yes, and there are many creative ways to incorporate bodily kinesthetic intelligence into the school day. Huitt suggests things like integrating physical activity into lessons, involving students in dance, theater, sports, and movement education.
I love those ideas. It's about recognizing that physical activity isn't just a separate subject. It's a fundamental part of who we are.
Now, are you ready to expand your social horizons? Next up, on the Brilliant Star framework, social or interpersonal intelligence.
Oh, let's connect.
Yeah.
This one feels particularly relevant in our increasingly interconnected world.
It is. Humans are naturally social beings. Huitt even mentions Dunbar's hypothesis, which suggests that our large brains evolved to navigate the complexities of social life.
So our ability to connect is literally in our DNA. But how do you even define social intelligence? It just feels like such a broad concept.
That's the challenge. There are many different perspectives. Huitt contrasts Goleman's ideas with the framework used by the school social behavior scales.
So Goleman, the emotional intelligence expert, he also has thoughts on social intelligence.
He does. Goleman breaks it down into social awareness, things like empathy and understanding social cues.
Okay.
And then social facility, putting those skills into action, like synchronizing your behavior with others, showing genuine concern.
So it's about being able to both read the room and respond appropriately.
Exactly. But Huitt also mentions these other ways to look at social intelligence. The school's social behavior scales, for example, focuses on interpersonal effectiveness, self-management, and even academic competence.
Wait, academic competence is part of social intelligence?
It highlights how interconnected all these capacities are. Managing your behavior, communicating effectively, navigating those social situations, those are crucial for success in school and life.
So it's not just about being popular or having lots of friends. It's about having those skills to build healthy relationships, collaborate, and achieve your goals in a social context.
Precisely. Hood also highlights CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. They've identified these 5 teachable social-emotional competencies that are key for both personal and social development.
Okay, what are those competencies?
Self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making.
Those sound essential, and they go beyond just like purely social skills. They're tapping into the cognitive, emotional, and conative domains too.
That's what makes them so powerful. CASEL is emphasizing a truly holistic approach to development, recognizing that all these capacities are working together.
So it's about nurturing the whole person, not just focusing on one isolated skill set.
Exactly. And they stress the importance of schools, families, and communities working together to cultivate these competencies.
It takes a village to raise a socially intelligent person. Now, what about spiritual intelligence? It's an area that often feels shrouded in mystery.
It certainly can be. And that's one of the challenges Huitt and Robbins highlight. Spiritual intelligence is incredibly difficult to define and assess objectively.
So how do we even begin to understand it?
Well, Huitt and Robbins offer this, broad definition.
Yeah.
Connecting to something bigger than ourselves, finding meaning and purpose in life, cultivating self-awareness, and forming those deep, meaningful relationships.
Tapping into a sense of transcendence, purpose, and connection.
Yes. But they point out that there's debate about whether it's truly a distinct intelligence or just an aspect of cognition or emotion.
Like, trying to define the undefinable.
Exactly. But even though it's hard to pin down, spirituality important to many people. Huitt and Robbins share examples of how researchers have tried to understand and measure spiritual intelligence.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are some of those examples?
One approach is to focus on the competencies people demonstrate when they're living a spiritually rich life. Hood mentions Amram's research, which identifies 5 categories of spiritual intelligence:
Which are?
consciousness, grace, meaning, transcendence, and truth.
Those are some pretty powerful concepts. But how do they, translate into everyday life?
Well, Amram and Dreyer developed a self-report scale to measure those dimensions. It looks at things like developing that refined awareness, living in alignment with your values, finding meaning in daily activities, experiencing interconnectedness, and just embracing an open and accepting attitude.
So it's about aligning your actions with your deepest values and finding purpose and connection in everything you do.
Precisely. But assessing spiritual development in children and youth gets even more complex. Huitt and Robbins point out there's a lack of clear developmental sequences, which makes it difficult to track progress.
So it's more about creating those environments that nurture spiritual growth, rather than trying to measure it in a standardized way.
Exactly. They highlight the work of educators like Palmer and McGreevy and Copley, who suggest incorporating spiritual elements into the classroom.
Like what?
Well, things like focusing on the arts, creating spaces of beauty and contemplation, exploring those profound questions that students raise, and engaging in service learning projects.
Creating a sense of wonder, awe, and connection in the learning environment.
Exactly. And Hood emphasizes that these activities need to be meaningful and authentic for each student. Otherwise, it's just going through the motions without really tapping into that deeper spiritual dimension.
It's about creating space for those, aha moments where students connect with something larger than themselves.
And speaking of connecting to something larger, let's move on to moral intelligence.
All right, let's delve into that ethical realm. This one feels especially crucial today with all the complex moral challenges that we face.
It is. Hood points out that there's been this renewed focus on moral intelligence and character development in recent years.
So we're realizing that intelligence isn't just about, cognitive abilities. It's also about having that strong moral compass.
Precisely. Hood highlights researchers like Hauser and Narvaez, who've been exploring those, biological foundations of moral intelligence.
So are you saying that we're, wired for morality?
It seems so. Narvaez proposes that our brains are pre-programmed with moral intuitions that guide our behavior. But, like any capacity, moral intelligence needs nurturing and development.
So we can't just rely on those, gut instincts. We have to cultivate that moral reasoning and decision-making skills, too.
Exactly. And Hood emphasizes how interconnected moral development is with all the other domains that we've discussed. He references Cole's research, which found that children's moral development is intertwined with their cognitive, emotional, social, and spiritual growth.
It's like a tapestry, where all the threads weave together to create that complete picture.
Yeah. Beautiful analogy. And Huitt points out that there are so many different perspectives on how moral development unfolds. Behaviorist, sociological, sociobiological, nativist, interactionist viewpoints.
So there's no one-size-fits-all answer to how we become moral beings. It's this complex dance of nature and nurture.
Exactly. But despite all the different theories, there's a common thread. Moral intelligence involves developing habits and patterns of thought, emotion, intention, and behavior that align with our sense of right and wrong, especially in social settings.
So it's more than just knowing the rules. It's about embodying those values in our actions and how we interact with others.
Precisely. Historically, moral character development has been seen as a fundamental part of education, especially for democratic societies. Hood points out that it was one of the main reasons for establishing universal public education.
So it's about cultivating citizens who can contribute to a just and ethical society.
Exactly. And there are many different moral character development programs. Hood reviews programs that range from simple moral quality of the month initiatives to comprehensive school-wide approaches that integrate moral character into everything.
Okay, so like a spectrum of approaches from basic to holistic.
And the research shows that the most effective programs have a few things in common. They're school-wide, they involve families, they address multiple components of moral character, thoughts, emotions, intentions, and behaviors, and they provide opportunities for students to put their learning into action through service to others.
So it's about creating that culture of ethical behavior that goes beyond just the classroom.
Exactly. Hood highlights Narvaez's work as a really promising approach. Her triune theory emphasizes those early childhood experiences in shaping our moral foundation, and her integrative ethical education program provides a framework for cultivating ethical sensitivity, judgment, motivation, and action.
So like a holistic approach that integrates those cognitive, affective, and conative elements.
Precisely. And it emphasizes service learning, allowing students to apply moral principles in real-world settings.
This is so fascinating. I'm really seeing how all of these capacities are interconnected and how crucial they are for navigating like the complexities of life in the 21st century.
And now we arrive at the final point on our star, the one at the very center that integrates all the others, the self.
Bring it on. We've explored all these different intelligences, but how do they all come together to form, our unique sense of self?
That's the big question. Who provides some really fascinating insights into how researchers have conceptualized the self and the factors that shape our self-perceptions.
I'm ready to dive into the mysteries of the self. Where do we even begin?
Well, it all starts with temperament. Hood explains that temperament is an innate aspect of personality, like it's something we're born with.
So it's like the raw material that our personalities are built on.
Exactly. Who mentions Derryberry and Reed and Kiersey, who've explored these different dimensions of temperament, things like excitability, irritability, introversion, and extroversion.
Okay, so those tendencies are like hardwired into us from the start.
It seems so. And research shows that temperament significantly impacts our learning styles, career preferences, and even our life outcomes.
Wow. So it's like our temperament sets the stage for like the kind of person we're likely to become.
But remember, it's not like a deterministic blueprint. We still have agency. Temperament is just one piece of the puzzle.
Okay, so if temperament is the foundation, what else shapes our sense of self?
Well, then we have personality. This is a broader concept, encompassing our thoughts, feelings, intentions, and behaviors.
So it's how we express our temperament in the world.
Exactly. There are a few different models that researchers use to describe personality. One really popular one is the five-factor model, also known as OCEAN.
Oh, I've heard of that. Remind me what those 5 factors are again.
Sure, they are. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
Okay, and can you give me like just a quick rundown of each trait?
Of course. Openness refers to curiosity, imagination, and willingness to try new things. Conscientiousness is about being organized, responsible, and goal-oriented. Extroversion is our tendency to be outgoing and energized by social interaction. Agreeableness reflects empathy, compassion, and the desire to get along with others. And lastly, neuroticism is about the tendency to experience negative emotions, like anxiety, worry, and sadness.
So we all fall somewhere on a spectrum for each of these traits, right?
Exactly. And research has shown that these traits are surprisingly stable over time, and they can predict a wide range of outcomes in our lives. Everything from political preferences and relationship patterns to career choices.
It sounds like our personalities have like a huge influence on the paths our lives take.
They do. But again, remember, we're not passive bystanders. We have the power to make choices and shape our own destinies. Personality is just one piece of the puzzle.
So we've covered temperament and personality. What other frameworks do researchers use to understand the self?
Huitt mentions the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI. This one is based on the work of Carl Jung.
Oh yeah, the one with all the letter combinations?
Yes. The MBTI looks at four key dimensions of personality: extroversion versus introversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, and judging versus perceiving.
Okay, so it's about identifying our preferred ways of interacting with the world and processing information.
Exactly. And the MBTI is often used in career counseling and team building to help people understand their strengths and preferences.
So it's about finding environments and roles where we can thrive.
Precisely. And then there's this other interesting framework that Huitt mentions, Peterson and Seligman's classification of 24 character strengths.
Tell me more about that one.
They identified 6 core virtues: wisdom and knowledge, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. And within each virtue, they pinpointed specific character strengths that we can cultivate.
Sounds like a toolkit for building a virtuous life.
Exactly. And you know what? These character strengths align perfectly with the concept of multiple intelligences. They really represent the best of humanity.
This is painting such a rich and complex picture of the self. But there's one more piece I'm curious about. What about self-concept, self-esteem, and self-efficacy? How do those fit in?
Great question. Huitt explains that these self-views are different from temperament and personality because they're constructed through our experiences and interactions with the world.
So they're shaped by our environment and the feedback we receive, not just these innate qualities.
Exactly. Initially, researchers thought these self-views were related to specific domains. So self-concept was cognitive, self-esteem was affective, and self-efficacy was tied to conation.
Okay, so self-concept is how we think about ourselves. Self-esteem is how we feel about ourselves. And then self-efficacy is our belief in our ability to actually take action.
That's the basic idea. But as Huitt points out, later research showed that all three of those self-views actually involved elements from all three domains: cognitive, affective, and conative.
So they're intertwined, just like everything else we've been talking about.
Precisely. Huitt really emphasizes that it's important to match the specificity of the self-view to the outcome you're wanting to predict.
Okay, can you give me an example of what you mean?
Sure. So if you wanted to predict someone's overall life success, a general measure of self-concept or self-esteem is going to be the most appropriate. But to predict their academic achievement, you'd need to look at their academic self-concept or self-esteem. And to predict their success on a specific task, you'd look at their self-efficacy for that task.
So using the right tool for the job.
Exactly. Huitt also debunks this common myth about self-esteem, the idea that, raising general self-esteem automatically leads to better academic performance.
So just making kids feel good about themselves isn't going to magically make them, better students.
Unfortunately not. Huitt cites research showing there's no direct link between general self-esteem and academic achievement.
So it's more about helping kids develop a realistic and accurate view of themselves based on, their actual abilities and accomplishments.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's a good point to wrap up our exploration of the self. We've covered a lot of ground, from temperament and personality to those self-views.
This has been an incredible journey through the Brilliant Star framework. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of what it means to be human.
And that's the point. It's about recognizing that vast range of capacities that we possess and the importance of developing all of them, not just the ones that are traditionally valued in school.
It feels like this framework could revolutionize how we approach education, work, and even our personal lives.
It's about shifting from that narrow focus on academic achievement to this holistic view of human flourishing.
Okay, before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's bring it back to Huitt and the framework.
Yeah.
What are his suggestions for putting all of this into practice?
That's where it gets really exciting. Huitt is a huge advocate for moving beyond traditional knowledge-based tests and embracing more holistic approaches to assessment. He suggests things like e-portfolios, which showcase the learner's entire problem-solving process and the products of their efforts.
So it's about capturing the richness and complexity of their learning journey, not just reducing it to a single score. Love it.
It's about creating a narrative of the whole person, highlighting their growth across all these different capacities.
That makes so much more sense. And it's in line with this whole idea of developing the whole person. But honestly, even frameworks designed to be holistic can sometimes fall short.
You're absolutely right, and that's exactly the point Huitt makes next. He uses the habits of mind framework as, like, a perfect example.
Oh, interesting. Habits of Mind is a framework I've heard of, but I always thought it was purely about, like, thinking skills.
That's a common misconception. It does include those critical thinking habits, like questioning, thinking flexibly, and striving for accuracy. But you know what else it includes?
What else?
Habits like managing impulsivity, persisting, taking responsible risks, and even thinking interdependently.
So it's acknowledging that you need more than just, like, brain power to effectively solve problems, right? You also need that emotional regulation, social skills, and, like, the drive to keep going even when things get tough.
Exactly. And that final habit, metacognition, that's the glue that holds it all together. It's about thinking about your own thinking, reflecting on your strengths and weaknesses, understanding how you learn best. It's like having this inner coach that's always pushing you to improve.
That's a powerful image. It sounds like habits of mind combined with everything else we've discussed, physical, spiritual, moral development, could be like a roadmap for truly well-rounded education.
You're getting it. That's precisely the point Haidt drives home with the Brilliant Star framework. Thriving in the 21st century isn't just about being, like, book smart. It's about cultivating this whole constellation of capacities.
It's almost like a recipe for a fulfilling life, right? Not just focusing on one ingredient, but understanding how they all work together to create something like delicious and complex.
That's a fantastic analogy.
Yeah.
And the really exciting part is that all of these capacities, they're not fixed. They can be developed, strengthened, and refined over time.
That's so empowering. So where do we even begin? Like, how do we actually start cultivating all of these capacities?
Well, Huitt's big takeaway is that we really need to shift our focus. It's not just about acquiring knowledge, it's about developing the whole person.
Right.
And to do that effectively, we need to create learning environments that actually nurture all of these dimensions.
Okay, that makes sense. But what would that look like in practice?
Well, think about it this way. Imagine a school that values physical activity as much as academic achievement.
Okay, yeah.
A school where students are encouraged to explore their emotions, develop their social skills, right alongside their cognitive abilities.
A school where creativity and innovation are celebrated, where students feel connected to something larger than themselves, and they're empowered to make a positive difference in the world.
Exactly. And it's not just about schools, right? This shift needs to happen in our workplaces, in our communities, even in our families. We need to create a culture that supports the full development of every individual.
It's a pretty radical idea, isn't it?
It is.
Moving away from that narrow definition of success to one that embraces the whole person.
Yeah, it is. But it's also incredibly exciting. Think about the possibilities if we can truly cultivate all of these capacities in everyone. Imagine the kind of world we could create.
A world where people are not only intelligent, but also compassionate, resilient, and purpose-driven. It's a beautiful vision.
And it's not just a pipe dream. There are already people and organizations out there working to make this vision a reality.
So this deep dive isn't just about understanding these capacities. It's also a call to action.
Absolutely. Huitt wants us, readers to be inspired to go create those experiences that help children and youth develop these capacities so they're really prepared for the challenges and the opportunities of adulthood.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation. It really feels like a paradigm shift, A whole new way of looking at human potential.
It is.
Remember, you are not just a collection of isolated skills or traits. You are a complex, multifaceted being with incredible potential.
That's right.
And to our listeners out there, we encourage you to reflect on which of these capacities you'd like to explore further. Maybe there's one that particularly resonates with you, or maybe you want to challenge yourself to develop a capacity that feels a little less familiar.
The beauty of the Brilliant Star framework is that it really gives you a roadmap for lifelong learning and growth.
So go out there and discover your own brilliance. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Brilliant Star framework.